Okay, greetings. My name is Jim Wickens from NFLDraftFanatics.com. And the purpose of this video/podcast is to show how the interactive player boards work on the NFLDraftFanatics.com simulator. And this is specifically dedicated to the draft card of the Houston Texans. So the way NFLDraftFanatics.com is set up, there are 32 teams. Each team has a unique player board. So there's 32 teams, 32 player boards. And the way the simulator works is when it's a team's turn to pick, it looks at the player board for the team. It will generally select the highest player on the board at the time of the pick. And that is the player that is selected. There are some advanced settings. We're not going to get into those here. A user could manipulate that a little bit as to what the simulator is going to do. But what I want to focus on is how to set up the draft cards. There was a default board that got applied to every team, and then as people do mock drafts, the boards change. And a few different things have happened since the initial player board was loaded. Like, for example, there were some rankings on linebackers and running backs. We want to move some of them up. We want to do the same thing for defensive backs and make sure the right defensive backs for round 1 and 2 are implemented a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some first-round challenges, second-round challenge, and a third-round challenge to start setting the board up. So what we're going to do, it's a first-round challenge. That's this button right here. And we're going to do the Houston Texans. So specifically, I need to work on the DBs for round 1. So we're going to do a first-round challenge with that. I'm going to do another first-round challenge to deal with linebackers. I'm going to do a third one to deal with defensive line. And actually, we're going to start with the defensive line. We're going to do that one first. And I will explain some of that as we go. So we're going to do defensive line, then we will do linebackers, and then we will do defensive backs. Okay, so we have the Texans. We have first-round challenge. We're going to do 3 of these. A first-round challenge is 5 unique first-round picks. Each time I pick a player, they're moving up the draft card. So here's what I mean by that. So I said we're going to work on defensive line first. So Mason Smith is already 6th on the Texans board. So he was there. He's under consideration for the first round. But I do want to also focus on a few other players. So I want to make sure Chris Jenkins is at the top of the board in round 2. So I'm picking him in a first-round challenge just to shoot him up the board. So everybody I pick right now is moving up the draft board, okay? This is the second pick. Leonard Taylor is another defensive lineman I want higher on the Texans board. Landon Jackson is another one. So right here, notice he's 100 on the draft card right now. Okay, I've done 3 of the 5 first-round picks. Okay, Sweat was another. So I'm picking him. And Mason Smith. Okay. So the defensive linemen to consider in the second round, Jenkins, Taylor, Jackson, Sweat, Smith. I did that to move them up. Now, right now, they're sitting at the top of the Texans draft card. So if anybody does a mock draft, right now, in like the next 5 minutes, there's a pretty good chance the Texans are taking a defensive lineman in round 1. And then the next position I'm going to work on is linebacker. So I'm going to do another first-round challenge for the Texans. This time I'm going to target the linebackers. Okay? So there are 5 linebackers that I want to move up the board. Okay? So I'm going to filter on linebacker. One of the linebackers I want higher is Trotter, so I'll pick him. He was already the number 1 linebacker on the board. Probably a second-round pick, but right now I'm just working on the draft card, not trying to predict where they're going to be picked or where the simulator is going to pick them. Another linebacker I want to move higher is Mondon right here. So he's 91 on the draft card right now. I picked him in a first-round challenge. He's not going to be 91 anymore. Okay. Stutzman He's currently 105. So I'm picking him. So he's not going to be 105 anymore. Okay. Now, did he go from 105 to 1 or did he go from 105 to 20? We'll talk more about that as this video continues. Dumas Johnson, probably round 2, round 3, maybe early round 4, but I want him higher than 137 on the draft card. So when I say working on the board, a board was loaded and we need to work on it. So the way to do that is to do first round, second round, and third round challenges. And Bethune is the last line. I want you to observe he's 255 right now. Okay, so my grades don't look great. My mother will tell you I never got good grades when I was in school anyway. But basically the way to interpret this is I was not picking players that were high on the draft card. And if other people agree with me, those Ds are going to turn into As very fast. Okay, so the last position we want to work on for the first round are the DBs. Okay, so we're going to do a first round challenge for Houston. Okay, so as the board sits right now, notice a couple of linebackers are sitting pretty high, as are the defensive linemen. Why? Because I just did 2 first round challenges. I pushed them up to the top of the card. Okay, so we need to work on the defensive back. So Arnold, I believe, goes in round 1. He should have a first round grade. So I'm going to pick Arnold. And then there are 2 safeties. It looked like one of the safeties was already pretty high on the board. But Wiggins, no, he's already 3rd, but I am going to pick him because he is one of the defensive backs that should have a first round grade. Okay, so Wiggins went. Kalen King went in round 1. Kool-Aid McKinstry is off the board as well. Okay, so Kool-Aid McKinstry was the other corner I was looking for. So Kitchens likely has a first round grade. Now, whether or not the Texans take Kitchens or focus on safety in round 1, I will let the Texans fans tweet at me at NFL Draft Fanatic. There's no I am Fanatic on my Twitter handle. If you don't like Kitchens in round 1, I did this to move him up the draft card, not because I think that is the right pick for the Texans. Okay, and then DeJean. DeJean, in this simulation, he went 1 overall, so there's a reason why he's not there. Okay, so in this case, and then King already went, right? Yeah, so King has already gone too. So is there another defensive back that I would do to finish this off for round 2? So Burke should be higher than 27 on the draft card, likely a second round grade. But I'm going to pick Burke just to finish that challenge. And we're going to do a second round challenge now where I can work on running backs. And if I've done any damage to the draft card, I can fix it. Okay, so we'll do King here to finish that out. But there were 5 defensive backs I just moved up. King, Burke, Kitchens, Wiggins, Arnold. Okay, so the purpose of doing that first round challenge is just to get them higher on the draft card. That was the goal. Okay, depending upon how often you use the simulator and how much you care about what the draft card looks like, you could be doing first round challenges for a while to get the card to look like what you want. And if you think about it, the reason I did defensive lineman first is, my opinion is, with this draft, you target an interior defensive lineman in round 2. So by me picking players that likely are going in round 2 first, when I did the linebackers, it pushed the defensive linemen down. Then when I did the defensive backs, it pushed the linebackers down and it pushed the defensive linemen down. There was some strategery that I was using to do that manipulation. Now we're going to do a second round challenge. I need to work on running backs, but I'll be able to do a lot more because there are not 10 running backs that I'm focused on. So a second round challenge is 10 unique second round picks. What you do with the 10 picks in the first round is completely up to you. You could pick the same player 10 times. You could pick 10 different players. You could pick 5 players twice. You can mix and match it however you want in round 1. But every round 2 pick is going to be unique. Now, some of the running backs I'm going to pick are pretty deep on the draft card. My goal would be, are the running backs there at the top of the draft card in round 4? Okay, some of them might appear round 3, round 2, but generally speaking, in this draft, I'm moving running backs up. I don't want the running backs to come all the way up to round 1 because you saw how quickly some of those players I grabbed moved up to a first round. I don't want that to happen to running backs. So I'm going to do a second round challenge to not bias the pick so much. Anybody you pick in the first round on this simulator, their value is going to go up really high. So they're going to move pretty high on the draft card very quickly if you pick them in round 1. So we're going to do a second round challenge. And the first round, I'm going to try to set the Texans draft card up. And I'll explain some of that logic as I go. So in round 1, right now the defensive backs and linebackers are sitting there at the top. I do like Troy Franklin to the Texans in round 1. So I'm going to pick Troy Franklin this one time. He should move from, I think he was 7th as the best player available. He should be closer to the top the next time we go through this. Okay, second round picks have to be unique, and I'm focused on running backs. Which running backs? Specifically, Devin Neal. He's 154 right now on the overall board here, and he needs to be higher. So I'm picking Devin Neal as part of my second round challenge to move him up the draft card. Not because I think the Texans should pick a running back in the second round, but because I want him higher on the draft card. Okay, so we're back to round 1. Okay, so the way that a second round challenge works is we're going to go through round 1, round 2, round 1, round 2, and we're just going to keep repeating that, and we have to do it 10 times. Okay, so we got some defensive backs sitting at the top, and I'm looking to see where some wide receivers are. So I do like Braylon Trace to the Texans in round 1. So I'm going to pick Trace here, and I've got 8 more picks to work on the wide receivers and get some of them higher. Okay, so I'm still working on the running backs for the second round, and that list looks okay. Okay, Marks is currently 239. I'm picking him in the second round challenge. He should be much higher than 239. So I've already taken Franklin, Thomas, Imworthy, and Egbuka, and Coleman, and Wilson should all be higher. So Wilson, notice he's 52 on the draft card. I'm picking him in the first round, and then I'm still working on running backs in the second round. Lloyd is right now player 250. Okay, he's probably going to be taken before the end of the 4th round. Okay, so Wilson, who I just picked, has moved to the top of the card. He literally went from 50 whatever to 7 with just 1 pick. Franklin, I've already taken. Brian Thomas should be higher than 41. The Texans would possibly consider him in round 1. Okay, so now sitting in round 2, let me review and see if I've got all the running backs. Isaiah Davis, 352. So I'm picking him because I want him higher on the board. So one of the reasons we have these second round challenges at this point of the draft cycle, so this is being recorded on December 12th, okay? We load a board in, and evaluations come in, analysis comes in, we want to move players without reloading the board. Because if we reload a board, all of the mock drafts people have done kind of get erased. The purpose of NFLDraftFanatics.com is every mock draft that is done, every round challenge that is done affects every mock draft which comes after. So that's part of the algorithm that we have. So I want you to observe Trice is a player I picked in round 1. He's moved up. You saw me take Wilson earlier. So you can see some of the players that I'm taking. So, for example, Keon Coleman should probably be a strong consideration for the Texans in round 1. So I pick him there. And then I believe at this point I've done all of the running backs. So I've done the running backs that I wanted to pay attention to. We are in iteration 5 of 10. So now I have 6 other picks for the Texans in round 2. Let's start talking about the draft card here a little bit. So Dumas Johnson, he was one of the players I took in the first round challenge. He's sitting at 39 overall. The player I pick right now, I want Dumas Johnson to move down. Stutzman would be a really good pick for the Texans in round 2. I think he could go in round 1. So if I pick him here, I can never pick him in this challenge again. So I'm going to do that. But I did hesitate there for a second. I was like, well, I could find a player below Stutzman and then take Stutzman in round 1 more time to move him further up. But I decided not to do that. Okay. So if I look here, so again, Mondin, round 2, that could work. But I probably want to find a player that is rated lower than Mondin who would be considered in round 2. And Lassiter fits that description, as does Mason Smith. Okay, so I will pick Lassiter. Okay, and now we are back to round. And that was the first round pick. So Lassiter just went in round 1. And then Mason Smith. So notice he's 41. The linebacker, Dumas Johnson, is 39. I'm picking Smith, hoping that he moves from 41 up to 40, and or Dumas Johnson falls from 39 to 40, and that they flip order. There's no guarantee that happens. In the first round, if that was a first round pick, I can, with a moderate amount of confidence, say that those 2 players would flip. In the second round, there is confidence, just not as much. Okay, so you see Lassiter, who I just picked in round 1, is rated pretty high here. Okay, so we are in round 1. Dallas Turner would be a good pick. Burke would probably be a second round pick. So I want to find a player. Is there a player that we see on this page like DeJean who could possibly go in round 1? Chop Robinson I like in round 1. So he is currently 30th. I am going to pick him. He should be higher than 30 the next time we come back. And then I have to find a unique second round pick. And once I pick somebody in round 2, they won't appear anymore. So notice Lassiter is sitting at the top of the draft card here. So that's the right player. Like if the draft fell this way, would you take Lassiter over the rest of the players that are listed? Now, maybe you want the defensive lineman up. So maybe we want Jenkins, who at one point was one of the top players, but because I did a first round challenge and moved him up, he's already fallen to 64th. So I will take Jenkins and start working on getting the defensive tackles back closer to the top. I've got 2 more iterations to go here in the second round challenge. So we will go Troy Franklin in round 1. So that's a repeat pick, but I wanted him closer to the top of the card. And then Leonard Taylor is at the top. So again, the defensive lineman. And actually, I'm going to do Landon Jackson. So I'm going to take the player that's furthest away from where I want him and pick him. So that's a technique I use a lot, is if there's 5 players I need to move up, I'm going to choose the 5th player. Then the next time it's the 4th player. The next time it's the 3rd, 2nd. So I start at the bottom and work my way up. You can start at the top and work your way down. I start at the bottom and work my way up, and let me know if your technique works too. Okay. And then I like Johnny Wilson. Is there another wide receiver after Wilson? Yeah, Egbuka and Worthy in round 1. So I will take Worthy in round 1 for the Texans. And then I will pick another defensive tackle here. Okay, and it looks like all the defensive tackles this time with the 2nd round were gone. What kind of edges are there? For round 2, I don't like too much of that list. Okay, so who would I go in the 2nd round here? So in this case, we've done a lot of the, like, I'm thinking like, okay, who would I start to consider in the 2nd round? Stover could be higher. He's probably better than 114, so I'm going to grab Stover. So that's me moving him up, even though I don't think he's really worthy of a 2nd round pick. Okay, so this is the last one. Egbuka, who's currently 53. I'm taking him in round 1. And I will take Blake Fisher. Say that he is worthy of a 2nd round pick. Okay, so the 2nd round challenge is done, and you can see I get a lot of low grades for the players that were falling really low on the draft card. Okay, so the way the grading works, players 1 through 8 on the draft card give you an A. So if they're in the top 8 of the draft card, they give you an A. If they are 9 through 16, you get a B. Okay, now you could pick a player at 9, you get a B. He's now in the top 8. The next time you pick him, you're getting an A. So basically the way the grading works, it's entirely based upon groupthink. The more people that agree, the higher the player will be on the card. And if other people agree with you and you agree with the other people, you're all getting A's. Okay. And again, my mother will tell you my grades in school were never anything to write home about. So I don't believe grading matters, but every draft simulator has a grade. So that was the way we chose to do it at NFL Draft Fanatic. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on a 3rd round challenge. So this is me setting the Texans up for a couple of things. I'm going to get a 3rd round challenge is 15 unique 3rd round picks. Okay, so can you come up with 15 players that you think the Texans would target in round 3? Now, keeping in mind that when you move a player, like when you do a 1st round challenge, you saw those players jump up the board. When I did a 2nd round challenge, they hopped. They didn't do as big of a jump, but they hopped. This is like a 3rd round challenge is like a dink. You're going to move them. A player I take in the 3rd round is going to move up the board, but they're going to move a little. So if I pick 15 players and you pick 15 players for the Texans to target in round 3, the 3 or 4 that we agree on will be the ones that sit at the top. And then those other 12 that I have and the other 12 that you have are going to be sitting there in like round 4, round 5 for the Texans. So think of this as when you do a 3rd round challenge, you are picking the player in the 3rd round. There's a really good chance that you're going to see them at the top of the draft card in round 4 or round 5, meaning that you may not actually pick them in round 3. You may pick them in round 4 or 5. So if there's a player you like for round 4 or 5, let's say some of the running backs that I moved up a little while ago, and you're saying, if I was the Texans, I wouldn't take a running back until round 4. We could take them as a part of the 3rd round challenge, and they're probably going to be sitting at the top of the draft card in round 4. Okay, so 3rd round challenge, Texans, we have 15 first round picks. We have 15 second round picks. So the first 6 first round picks I'm doing to manipulate the board, but I will make the last 8 first round picks count. And the reason why I say that is that you've already seen me manipulate the board. But for example, Thomas should be higher than Lassiter. So that's me saying, okay, I have to manipulate the board and say how many players that are below 20 should be higher than Lassiter. Okay. Trice, definitely. And there was also a safety that was right above Trice. So I'm moving Trice above the safety and above the corner for the Texans. Okay. 2nd round. Okay. Which of these players is the right player for the Texans in the 2nd round? So notice like Travion Henderson is here. If you don't think the Texans are taking a running back in round 2, find a player after the running back, such as Chris Jenkins. Move Jenkins higher on the board. Okay. So that was round 1 and round 2. Now this is round 3, which has to be unique. I can pick whatever position I want. I'm not working on a specific position. I'm working on the board now. Okay, so a couple things. Landon Jackson, if he is there in round 3, I think that's a really good pick. He's sitting at the top of the draft card. So anytime you can, when you do a round challenge, whether it's a 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round challenge, if you're picking the player at the top of the draft card, that means that the draft card is set up effectively, right? You're picking the best player available. Okay, so let's continue working. Okay, so there's Lassiter, there's King. What players should be higher than them? I'd argue Wilson and Thomas should both be higher. Stutzman should be higher. I'm going to take Stutzman because he should be higher than a couple of those players that I listed. So I'm taking him in round 1 of the 3rd round challenge, and I'm manipulating the draft card. Okay. So Wilson is sitting there in round 2. Is that a good pick for the Texans? I would argue yes. So he's sitting at the top of the card. That's the player I would want to take. That's a draft card that has been set up effectively. Okay. This is the 3rd round pick. This must be unique. So once I pick this player, we won't see them again. So what I look for is, for example, if there's a quarterback listed, I might pick the player after the quarterback to move them up. There's one of the running backs, another one of the running backs, and another one of the running backs that I picked as part of the 2nd round challenge. They're sitting there just on the outside of the 3rd round pick. So I'm going to take the linebacker there. Okay, so now we're back to round 1, and we have to do this 15 times. So I'm not necessarily going to talk through every single pick, but we have to go through and do this 15 times. So Stutzman, that was where he just moved up to. Okay, I will take Wilson to move him higher than Lassiter. Okay. So now we're sitting in round 2, and look at the wide receivers that fell to Houston in round 2. So some of that sounds like a very crazy first round. I like Coleman. out of that list. So that's also me trying to get Coleman's value to be closer to the other three wide receivers that were listed above him. Okay, so this is a third round now. So what players on this list do we like in round 3? Blake Fisher, round 3, sounds very good to me. Okay. I like JT possibly in round 1. Because the draft order will change between what is today, December 12th, and the end of the season, right? The Texans theoretically could be picking 32. It's setting up the draft card will help when the actual draft order changes. Okay. Would you take Stutzman if he's there in round 2? I think that is the right pick. He's sitting at the right part of the card. Even if Egbuka and Lassiter are there, I think that the best player available, I thought those 3 were in the proper order. Okay, now we're entering the 3rd round. So this is a unique pick. Once I pick this player, you won't see them in any of the subsequent iterations. So I like Roman Wilson in round 3. I like Tyler Davis in round 3. I like McKinley Jackson in round 3. So I'm going to take McKinley Jackson. I like Dallas Turner in round 1. And he was pretty far down the draft card. So again, as I'm scanning, I'm looking for players that will likely have a first round grade that should be higher. And that's some of the logic for who I am picking. So again, Stutzman versus those defensive linemen, I think those players are in about the right order. Maybe you would have Taylor and Smith slightly higher than Lassiter. So I'll take Taylor this time to try to move him up. And this is my unique 3rd round pick. Who do I like? I like Singer in round 3. So again, when I pick somebody here in the 3rd round, that player was a 4th round, like he was like 106, which would be effectively a 4th round player, right? So he's going to move up a little bit, but like he may have moved up from 106 to 105. The jump when you pick somebody in a 3rd round challenge won't be high until you either do a lot of 3rd round challenges or you get a lot of your friends to do a 3rd round challenge and see how many of the picks you agreed with. Okay. DeJean should be higher than Burke and Trotter, according to me. So that's why I'm picking DeJean there. It's the 1st round pick. Again, this is me manipulating the draft card, not necessarily saying this is what the Texans will do. Now, if Mason Smith is sitting there at the beginning, or I should say during the Texans pick for round 2, I think that's a really good pick. And if you look at the other players that are available in the 2nd round, like this is the 2nd round pick, this is the 2nd round pick. Like that's a draft card that is set up effectively because the top player is who you want. And I'm not too fond of some of the players that are listed immediately after him. There may have been one wide receiver there that I'll probably grab in one of the other iterations that I would want to move up. But that was a tough 2nd round. But that's why you do these, because the simulator is randomly doing, like if you were to analyze the drafts that's going on to the left, you may not like the draft to the left, but the simulator is doing this so that you set up your draft card. It may not be the best simulation on the left, but focus on the draft card and not the simulation. And that's the purpose of the activity. Okay, third round, I like Stackhouse. Ainias Smith, I think he could go round 3, and he was 116 on the draft card. Okay, so at this point, just to remind everybody of where we are in iteration 7 of 15. So after this one, we're going to be halfway done. Kitchens should be higher than the 2 people above him. That's why I'm picking him. The second round pick is coming up. Okay, so we have a couple defensive linemen sitting at the top of the board in the second round, and that was one of the reasons I took them in the first round challenge when we first started. This is the third round pick, Zach Zinter in round 3. And notice that third round board is getting a little scarce. It's really difficult right now for me to find other players that should be, let's say, that I know should be higher. And that's the challenge. That's why we call it a third round challenge. It's not going to be easy when you do a third round challenge. Okay, so now we are back to round 1. The safeties that I have recently taken are sitting at the top of the card. And now we need to start getting the top players higher. So I need Thomas to move up. I need Chop Robinson to move up. So I know who my next 2 first-round picks would likely be, assuming the players are available. Okay, so I took a defensive lineman with the second pick, and then I need to find a player with appropriate value for the third round. And I actually have a couple of ideas as to who I'm going to look for here. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the back of the page. And because the algorithm has things where you pick a player and it will subtract value from players. Sometimes when it subtracts, the player you want is actually at the very bottom of the draft card. This time I knew that player was going to be there, but that's not always the case. So, okay, so the next, there was another player I thought back here on round 1 that I wanted to move. Yeah, Chop Robinson and Arnold both need to be higher. Okay, so the default algorithm is it selects the top player. If it doesn't select the top player, it's looking at the player list 2 through 8. So meaning that if the simulator was picking for Houston right now, it's considering everybody from Newbin to James to Sawyer to Bullock to Carson to Beebe to Lassiter to Stutzman. Those are the 8 players that it is considering. So in this case, I will take Stutzman. He is the top player on the board. It tells me that, again, if I can pick the top player, that tells me that that part of the draft card is set up effectively. I definitely liked where those top 3 or 4 players were for the Texans in that regard. Let's go look at the back of the card. Don't have to worry about that. Let's look at the next page back. I think we're okay there. Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody else dropped to the back of the card. We don't need to go through 70 pages. Okay, let's do Tyler Davis, possible 3rd round pick. Okay, we're back to round 1. This is upcoming a round 2 pick. And this is my unique 3rd round pick, like Stackhouse. It's we're at iteration 11, so I've got 4 more of these, including this one. This is going to be a 3rd round pick, so I have to find a unique player. Gabe Hall, I like in round 3. I like Worthy in round 1. And there's 3 iterations left. So I want to make sure that that 1st round pick that I just made, Worthy, is going to be really close to the top. And I have to make a conscious effort to do that so that anybody else that's doing a simulation gets a competitive pick from Houston. Donovan Jackson. I like Leggett in round 2. That's a unique round 2 pick. I don't think we've picked him during this challenge before. Okay, 3rd round pick has to be unique. Okay, and this is the last one. So I've manipulated the draft card, and what we're going to do to prove all of the work that we just did over the last 45 minutes is we will do a 4-round mock for the Texans and just take a look at how the board looks at the time we draft for the Texans. The simulator always seems to go slower when I have a podcast going. But let me know if you see any performance issues when you go and try to do this on your own. Again, you can tweet me at NFL Draft Fanatic. There is no I in Fanatic on my Twitter. My name is Jim Wickens. I have another Twitter that you could find as well. But I try to do all the NFL Draft Fanatics stuff from the NFL Draft Fanatics Twitter. Okay, so there's a 3rd round challenge. You have a screenshot that you could copy and paste to social media if you chose. But that was a lot of work. And, the 1st round challenges, they don't take long. The 2nd round challenge didn't take long. We spent most of the time doing that 3rd round challenge. Let's do a 4-round Texans mock. Okay, no challenges. This is just straight up 4 rounds. You get one shot only. This is the way every other simulator works. Let's go see the results of working on the Texans draft card. Okay, so a couple things I observed. Somebody has put a quarterback at the top of the Pittsburgh draft card. I can look and see different teams and fans. I did not know Bo Nix was at the top of the Seahawks draft card either, right? So fans have gone in and manipulated whichever draft cards they have chosen. Okay. And that's the way the simulator works. Even though I don't agree that's how certain teams are going to pick, if you don't agree, you have to go in and do a Chicago 1st round challenge and manipulate their board to get it to think like you. Okay. So the purpose of this simulator is to be everybody's simulator. This is not my player board. It is not your player board. It is not Draft Text. It's not PFFs. It is the player board from the people that use the simulator. It's just that simple. Okay. So who would the Texans go with in round one? If we look at the top 8, it looks pretty good relative to all of the effort and stuff. And I'm not doing anything here to manipulate the board. I'm saying, like, who would the Texans pick? I like Dallas Turner over Braylon Trice. So I'm going to say the Texans would go edge. Okay. Now, edge looks like it's a deeper need where it's like a wide receiver like Igbuka or Worthy and even Franklin. I'm actually going to go Franklin because that's a bigger need. Okay. So second round, we're going to look for a DB based upon need. So if we look at the board, the Texans need a defensive tackle. Mason Smith is sitting at the top. And the second round DBs aren't there. So not going to reach for a DB. Let's do Mason Smith. Okay, so now we're at the third round. So in this case, we've done wide receiver, defensive line. We probably would need to do DB, tight end, or edge. So some people have Landon Jackson as an edge. So I could pick him. He's sitting at the top of the board. And if you look here, not all of these, I only selected a couple of these guys in a third round challenge. Like I know I selected Jackson, and I know I selected Davis. I know I selected McKinley Jackson there, Singer, Stackhouse. So I see a couple of players that I picked, but keeping in mind with the third round challenge, if you want players to sit at the top of this draft card for the third round, take them in the second round challenge. It's going to move them up higher. The third round challenge, you'll see what the fourth round board looks like. That's where the value is. So I'm going to take Jackson here, saying he's an edge. So in this case, the Texans have double dipped on the defensive line. They're taking wide receiver, interior line, and Landon Jackson can play inside or edge. He could play a couple of spots along the line. So at this point, the Texans would likely need a DB. But you can also see here were the running backs I took in a second round challenge. Okay. I never took a running back in a third round challenge. I don't know how close you were paying attention to that, but I never actually took the running backs, but they're sitting nearly at the top of the draft card in round 4. And that's simply based upon them being really low on the draft card. I grabbed them once in a second round challenge, and they're almost at the top of the draft card in the 4th round. Okay. And that's generally the way the simulator works. You have to repeat taking the player for them to move up. Picking them once doesn't immediately move them to that position. This has to be consensus. So you can do your mock drafts. You can pick players and put them where you want. Other people can pick players and put them where they want. And if you begin to agree, those are the players that are going to converge at that round value on the draft card. So in this case, I like Abrams Drain, round 4. And there's another round 4 pick. I like Malichi more. Okay, so let's talk about the grading for a little bit. Troy Franklin was not on the first page. I don't remember if he was 16th overall on the board, but a B means he was somewhere between 9 and 16. Okay. The A+ meant that player was at the top of the draft card at the time I took him. The A+, he was at the top of the draft card at the time I took him. The C, so the A is 1 to 8, B is 9 to 16, and I believe 17 through 32 is the C. So that's how that player gets there. Or that's how that grade gets there. So my name is Jim Wickens. This is NFLDraftFanatics.com. It is, to the best of my knowledge, the only interactive draft simulator. Every user which uses the simulator is modifying a player board that's going to affect every mock draft that happens after. So if you do a Houston Texans mock, you're affecting the Texans board. So whenever a user is picking for a different team, your interactions will impact who Houston takes in their mock draft. And that's the basic concept of how this simulator was designed. So if you have any questions, message me or tweet me at NFL Draft Fanatic. There's no I in Fanatic. Okay. NFL Draft Fanatic on Twitter. If you do a mock draft and post the graphic, tag me in it. I would be happy to have a dialogue with you on your mock. If you think the player values here are incorrect, do a mock draft and they'll change, right? So tell me which players you thought were valued lower on this simulator. And it's pretty easily fixed if multiple people agree with you. So thank you very much. I hope you have a good day and enjoy the rest of your season. Thank you.